We've been looking at this theme, light in the darkness, about how the Dharma can help us when bad things happen, which they do, in adversity, and how we can even turn adversity into something positive. So as part of that theme, as a sort of mini theme for the last few weeks, we've been looking at a traditional teaching called the 7 points of training the mind. We often just called it the mind training. This is a short, pithy, very, very condensed text that gives us some powerful but really quite radical instructions, if you like, practice instructions on precisely this, on how to use adversity and even negative mental states to move us forward on the path. So we heard from Vadanya right at the beginning of this mini-series how right at the beginning of the text it says, know the meaning of this text and the 5 defilements will be turned into the path to enlightenment. And then a bit later it says, when evil fills the world and its inhabitants, turn adverse conditions into the path to enlightenment. So that's what it's all about. The text gives us ways, really powerful ways, to change bad things that happen, things we don't want to happen, from things that get in the way of our practice into opportunities to grow spiritually. So it does this several different ways. It does this, one way it does it is to give us ways to use the dukkha, the pain and discomfort we experience when things don't go our way, to use that dukkha, to change that dukkha from something that separates us from others and leads us to focus on our own negative mental states, changes it from that into something that connects us with others and increases our metta for others. So we heard from Vajratara how this mind training text gives us a sort of version of the metta bhavana. It's like a metta bhavana and mindfulness of breathing combined. Meditation that uses our own suffering as a tool to put us in touch with the sufferings of others, to connect with the sufferings of others, and to increase our metta, to increase our sense of connection. And we heard how we can take that approach, that meditation, if you like, off the meditation cushion and use it to transform all the daily events that we'd rather weren't happening. When we're waiting in the bus, waiting for the bus in the rain, when we're in the dentist's waiting room or the doctor's waiting room, stuck in a traffic jam, whatever. We've got a toothache, we've got a cold. It helps us transform all these times when we might normally focus on our own dukkha and so make it a lot worse. And instead uses it to increase our sense of connection and metta for others. So as part of the way it does that, part of the way it helps us to use adversity to increase our positive mental state, it offers us some radical attitudes that can cut across our usual tendency to blame others for our dukkha, which just traps us in a sort of painful states of resentment and helplessness. So we heard from Sangha Gita about the 2 slogans, drive all blame onto one and be grateful to everybody, and how using these can rescue us from these cycles of blame and resentment and feeling like a victim, and instead give us a sense of agency and power, which feels great, even when things aren't going the way we want them to, even when things get hard. So as a bit of an aside there, those 2 slogans, be grateful to everyone and put all blame onto one, they're examples of just how terse and how cryptic this text is, this mind training text is. You can't really understand it unless you're sort of led through it by someone who's familiar with the tradition, as Sangha Gita did last week. So anyway, that's one way the mind training helps us to transform adversity, by helping us to use it to connect to others, to experience positive emotion, when otherwise we might be focused on our own pain, our own dukkha. Another way it helps us to transform adversity is to see that what we think of as bad is only bad because of our stories about it. So the mind training helps us to transform adversity, as well as by compassion and metta, by wisdom. And we will hear from Satyajyoti about that next week. But a third way the text tells us we can transform adversity is through what it calls special practices. Sounds very mysterious. And I'm sorry, it's going to stay mysterious because we haven't got time to talk about it. But so what I'm going to do, what I want to do is move on to the next few lines, which are also fairly mysterious, which run, this brief essential instruction should be applied with the 5 forces. So what I'd like to do tonight is tell you what these 5 forces are and invite you to put them to work, this week. The 5 forces are a sort of technology of change, which is the title of this talk. They're tools for making the things we want to happen, with the changes we want to happen, for making them actually happen. Now, we humans are not very good at changing ourselves. We have an idea of the person we want to be, and every so often we make a resolution to be more like that person, or do something that we'll know will make us healthy or happy or contribute to the world. But very often that resolution does not stick. I think I read somewhere that something like 90% of New Year's resolutions are abandoned in January. I think I also read somewhere that 90% of statistics are made up on the spot, but it gets the point across an awful lot of the time. When we decide, we make a resolution, we decide to do something, we really, really mean it, but somehow it fades away. Somehow it fades away. We can probably all think of times that we've decided to do something positive and really meant it at the time, but then not carry it through. And this seems to be a pretty almost universal human experience. It's a feature of the way we are as humans. For example, in the Bible, St. Paul says, "The good that I want to do, that I do not do. The evil that I do not want to do, that I do." And even the great Buddhist teacher Shantideva says in his great text, the Bodhicharyavatara, I am somehow led back towards those same old states of being. I seem to have no will about this, as though I am under a spell. What is going on here? What is driving me? What is it that lives inside me? Well, what is going on here is that our higher conscious mind may really want to do something and fully intend to do it, but there are deeper and older layers of our being that often do not agree. And unless we get these depths to agree, what we want to do won't happen. It'll get forgotten, it'll get undermined, it'll get obstructed in some way. So on the introductory course, we often use, or used to use certainly, the analogy of a rider and their horse. So we talk about our rational conscious mind as the rider of the horse. And our depths, these deeper, older parts of ourselves, if you like, are the horse. The rider may think they're headed in a particular direction. They really think that, and they really intend to do that. But all too often it is obvious to everybody else that that is not what is happening. The rider may think they're heading for the bright spiritual light, for enlightenment or world peace or whatever it is they're heading for, but the horse is usually headed for a warm stable, a full nose bag, and other horses that it finds attractive, among other things. So if we want to make our resolutions stick, we must talk to the horse, get the horse on our side. We need our aspirations to sink into our depths. And this is where the 5 forces come in. Buddhism has accumulated a lot of wisdom about how our hearts and our minds work. And it's used that to give us some very, very practical way of making our intentions more of a reality. And one result is the teaching of the 5 forces, which we have slightly adapted to suit our present circumstances and ways of thinking. So if we want to make any significant change, if we want to stick, the 5 forces are a really good way of helping us to do that. If we want to meditate every morning, if we want to go running every evening, if we want to go to bed earlier, if we want to get out of bed earlier, if we want to eat less, the 5 forces could help. If we want to change the way we behave when we're around a particular person that we find difficult, we want to change the way we behave in a particular difficult circumstance that often comes up, again, the 5 forces could help. If we want to carry through with a commitment that is going to get difficult and we know ourselves well enough to know that we might give up when it gets tough, the 5 forces are a big help. If we want to cut down on our screen time or reduce our addiction to social media and electronic devices, the 5 forces could be just what we need. In fact, we could use the 5 forces to help us to achieve anything skillful that we want to achieve. So before I explain a bit about the 5 forces, you could think about something positive you would like to do in the coming week, or something negative that you don't want to do, that you want to stop doing, that you want to reduce. I've already given some examples of the sorts of things you might think about. You might want to, how about thinking about something now? Just take a few seconds to think about something that you'd like to put in place that you know is going to be beneficial to you, be beneficial to others. You know, at a conscious level, you'd really like to do this, but for some reason you haven't done it. Given loads of examples already. Okay, so maybe you've thought of something. You'll get a chance to firm up a bit on this in the groups later, and to share how you got on next week. But as I described the 5 forces, you could think about how you would apply them to whatever it is you want to change, to whatever it is you want to make happen. Okay, so what are these mysterious 5 forces that I've called the technology of change? Well, the first is called the force of motivation. So the background to that is really that we humans are really, really good at doing what we want to do, but we're not very good at doing things we think we ought to do. When we really want something, we put loads of effort into getting it. If we want to pass an exam, get a job, start a relationship, whatever, we really put a lot of effort in. When we try to do something because we should do it, rather than because we want to do it, we all too often go through the motions, do it half-heartedly. We often aren't very effective. So what the Dharma tells us is that the very first step in achieving anything is to really want it. And that wanting has to go deep. It has to get down to the horse. Because often we sort of half want something, just part of us wants it. And when this happens, we really aren't consistent in the way we try to make it happen. But when we really want something through and through, then we go for it, then we really take some stopping. So our first step in achieving anything is to really want it. And we need to get it across to our whole being that we really want it, not just the top few inches of our head. So to do this, to get it sort of sinking down into our whole being, really, really affecting the whole of us, it really helps to spend some time reflecting on just how good it would be if what we want to happen did happen. And also just how bad it would be if what we want to happen doesn't happen, or if what we don't want to happen does. We might need to use our imagination to really see the consequences, either way. So if we're resolved on, say, going running every day or going running 4 times a week or something, we could use our memory and our imagination to connect with how good it is to be fit and healthy and full of energy, how good we would look if we were fit and healthy and good of energy, how good we would feel. And we could also, on the other side, we could use our imagination to really see what it would be like to be unfit. Maybe, especially as the years pass and we get older, how would we look? How would we feel? So how badly do we want this? How badly do we want to put in place something that will mean we feel good, we look good, rather than feeling bad, looking bad, etc. And that getting worse as time goes on and more difficult to achieve. So we could imagine the consequences either way. We could also imagine the feeling of freedom and power we will get from making what we want to happen, and how depressing it would feel if we let ourselves down. So if we take on to meditate every morning, for example, we could remember what a difference it makes to our emotions and our relationships when we do that. How this makes us much more the person we want to be. How, in fact, it makes us more attractive. It even affects the way we look, how our face looks, and how we feel so much better about ourselves when we're like that, when we're the person who meditates. And we could also connect with how deflated we'll feel if our decision to meditate turns into just another resolution that got forgotten. So that's the first aspect of the force of motivation. To make something happen, we really need to want to make it happen. And to do that, it's really helpful to do a bit of work on that, to spend some time on it, using the memory, the imagination. Spend some time reflecting on this. Put aside a few minutes every morning or evening to really contact our motivation. So for those who are interested, the Sanskrit word that I think is translated here as motivation or wanting is chanda. And positive chanda, Dharma chanda as it's called, is seen as a very, very important and necessary quality for successfully practicing the Dharma. The idea that Buddhist tells us we should be without desire, which you sometimes hear, is not true. Without desire, we wouldn't do anything. The Dharma tells us we need lots and lots of positive desire, lots of positive chanda. So cultivating desire for the positive is the first part of the force of motivation. But it's not enough on its own. That desire has to turn into a positive, definite decision. I will act on this. I will make this happen. So lots of people want to be slim and fit, but they don't all decide to eat less and exercise more. So we need to turn that chanda into a definite decision that involves our actions, that we know we're doing it. We know we're doing the things that will bring it about. And the traditional word for that, the Sanskrit word for that is adimoksha, that sort of decisive, making a decision. So to use the force of motivation, you could make it a practice to revisit your motivation each morning, reconnecting with your desire, making a definite decision to do what we said we would do in the day ahead. So you could do that. One way to do that, a powerful way to do that, is to do it formally sitting in front of your shrine, if you've got a shrine. Whether or not you meditate in the morning, make it a practice to just connect with your motivation for practicing that day. Make it a practice. Maybe bow, light candles and incense as part of that practice of connecting with motivation. So that's the first force of motivation. The second of the 5 forces is the force of familiarization. Even when we genuinely want to do something, we have to make, and even when we really have made a firm decision to do it, I'm definitely doing this, that still isn't enough. We need to keep our decision in mind in the midst of the hurly-burly and distractions of everyday life. Often we're so distracted and dispersed by events and our own mental states that we've got minds like sieves. We get to the end of the day and think, oh, I meant to do that. Oh, I didn't do it. So we need to find ways to stay mindful of our resolution as we go through the day. Excuse me. So mindfulness has been a fashionable concept for quite some time now, but there are several aspects of mindfulness that are taught in Buddhism that I think sometimes get left out when mindfulness is talked about in the West. It's often talked about as all being in the present, but it's not just that. There are at least 3 traditional Buddhist words that get translated as mindfulness in the West. And one of these is samprajanya, which Sangharashta often translated as continuity of purpose. Continuity of purpose means that we keep our objective in mind. We keep going for it, we keep moving towards it, and we don't allow ourselves to be pushed off course by all the stuff that happens around us or by our own moods and reactions. And to put our resolutions into place, we need to maintain samprajanya. We need to maintain continuity of purpose. This is what I'm doing. We need to make our mind so familiar with our decision that it's always there in the background, influencing the way we behave. And a really practical way of keeping our mind familiar with our decision is to use what we call reminders. So reminders could take all sorts of forms. They could be strategic post-it notes on the mirror, first thing in the morning, Buddha images on our screensaver, alarm calls on our phone at different times of the day that say something like, remember to practice. Messages from friends that you could recruit to help you. We could wear special clothes or put on a special ring or a pendant that reminds us. So later in the groups, I think you'll get a chance, I hope you'll get a chance to plan some reminders, to think of some reminders to keep your decision in mind in the week ahead. So that's the first two, the force of motivation. We need to want it. The force of familiarization, we need to keep it in mind. We need to stay mindful. We need continuity of purpose. And the third of the 5 forces is traditionally called the force of the white seed, which again sounds very mysterious. So traditionally, the white seed meant a good action, a positive action that we undertake. Like making a large gift, which could bring us a lot of what is traditionally called merit, and dedicating that merit to the success of our resolution or our enterprise. So this idea of merit it's really important in many traditional schools of Buddhism. So the idea is that the positive actions bring merit, which can, I mean, it's almost talked about like sort of spiritual money. It can be stored up almost like riches in the bank or spent in order to make something happen. Or best of all, it can be given away to others or used to benefit others. So this idea of merit, probably not something that's very popular with Western Buddhists, but it does point to a certain spiritual truth. Positive actions do bring positive karma. And positive karma, that means spiritual strength. It means weight, spiritual weight, heft. Positive actions create a sort of positive spiritual current in the depths of our being, which could be seen as a sort of wealth. And this wealth can be used to bring positive things about. So if that works for you, you could see the white seed in that very, very traditional way as some very, very positive action that brings merit. Would mean doing something highly positive, like making a big gift and dedicating the merit from that to the success of whatever it is you want to make happen. That's a good way of seeing it, and any big gifts to the Buddhist Center would be very appreciated. But if that idea of merit doesn't really work for you, you could also see the white seed as an unusual or even shocking action that jolts our unconscious mind, jolts the horse, prods the horse, and tells it that something different is now happening. Tells us that now we're going to do something different, something that gives that horse a jolt and tells it that things are different. So I think one example of this that many of us have probably experienced, I think, is the example of going on a solitary retreat. So order members and many, many mitras, but order members in particular, are advised to do a reasonably long solitary retreat every year. Taking themselves off ideally somewhere quite remote where they won't see anybody or won't see many people, taking themselves away from all their usual tasks, all their usual entertainments and distractions. And that could sound like a form of torture. You know, you could imagine yourself sitting there all day thinking, well, I've meditated 3 times and what am I going to do till dinner? 2 weeks completely on your own with no distractions but your own mind. But in my experience, actually, and in the experience of many other people, it doesn't work like that. And I think that's because, partly because preparing for a solitary involves a sort of white seed or lots of mini white seeds that tell our unconscious that to change its usual expectations. Going on a solitary retreat takes a lot of planning. We have to find somewhere suitable, which isn't necessarily easy. We have to plan how to get there, which if it's remote, cannot be easy. We have to plan our food. How am I going to eat for 2 weeks? We need to finish up all our loose ends at home. We might prepare ourselves also by looking at a particular text or a particular teaching that we want to practice while we're away. So all these things mean that by the time that retreat happens, our whole being has got the message. Our whole being is prepared. Our whole being knows that something different and significant is going to happen. So that when we get there, we're ready and primed. And in fact, it's easy. So that's one example of a white seed. It's maybe not a great example because it's actually lots of little white seeds, but for some sorts of white seeds, it can be a case of the wackier, the better. So you could spend the night in a graveyard. How about that? I know people who have certainly done late night pujas alone in a graveyard. Cut off your hair, dye it purple. Well, whatever. Amoghavamsa once famously painted his nails red, or was it pink? Which is a good reminder. Where white seeds can also be a reminder, but a really wacky reminder works quite well. So we've maybe stepped down from the big gift, the meritorious action, to the shocking action or the preparatory action. A less radical way, again, of seeing the white seed is to think of it as an action that presumes the success of what we decide to do. The quitting smoker throws away all his ashtrays and lighters. The newbie runner buys shorts and shoes. Or more radically, the person who's decided to free themselves from addiction to electronic media gives away their phone. So you could think about this in respect of whatever positive change you want to bring about. What will my white seed be? How am I going to tell my debts that I'm serious about this? Will it be a meritorious action, a big sort of positive action? Will it be something really wacky that I can do that in a sense will shock my horse? Or will it be something that presumes I'm going to succeed in this? How am I going to tell my debts that I'm serious about this? This isn't just another week like any other. So that's our first three forces. The fourth is called the force of destruction, or traditionally sometimes the force of destroying demons. What this really means for us is thinking about what will derail us, what will get in the way, and having strategies in advance to deal with these obstacles. So if we want to succeed in anything, we need to ask ourselves in advance, what situations are likely to come up, or what moods in ourself, mental states in us are likely to come up that will blow us off course. And we need to be aware of those in advance and be prepared. So, for example, if we decided to meditate every morning before work, and every Thursday we go out drinking with some college friends in the evening, we can predict that on Friday morning, we won't want to get out of bed. How are we going to deal with that? Should we skip the drinks this week? Or if not, what else could we do? Put the alarm clock on the other side of the room, ask our partner to kick us out of bed even if we object. I don't know. You need a strategy. If we want to behave with more metta towards a difficult person at work, we might need to think, what is it about this person that gets my back up? How do I feel when that happens? And how can I respond differently to that feeling? If I'm not going to look at my phone this Wednesday, say, what will I feel like when there's nothing to distract me that evening? How will I cope with that? What is the feeling that I get when I can't reach for my phone? You might want to try it sometime, actually. So what is going to get in the way and how will I deal with that? Could be something internal, like the fact that I know I often don't want to get out of bed in the morning. Or it could be something external, like a difficult situation we know is going to come up. So then the last of our five forces is traditionally called the force of aspirational prayer. This might sound weird and off-putting, but we use these five forces to help people set themselves up for what we call an urban retreat, which some of you might have done. We do these every now and then to try to give people the benefit of being on retreat while they're still living at home. So we use these five forces in the urban retreat, and we felt very nervous about including aspirational prayer. We very nearly left it out, but then we were surprised when we got the feedback at the end of the retreat that many people found it one of the most powerful of the forces. And in fact, lots of people said it was the best thing about the urban retreat, the thing that they got most out of. But this idea of prayer might sound weird and maybe even non-Buddhist. So what is the force of aspirational prayer all about? Well, it can be difficult for me as I am now, or us as we are now, to change us as we are now. We are what we are now, partly because that's what we want to be. We do what we do because at some level, that's what we want to do. And when we start our Buddhist practice, we might find it really easy to make a lot of positive changes quite quickly. And we can get into thinking that it's always going to be like that. But after a while, we often come across patterns in ourselves or habits in ourselves that have deep roots, strong currents that are not at all easy to change. And when this happens, it can be a great help to invoke, as it were, help from something higher than ourselves as we are now, because ourselves as we are now is the problem. Perhaps help from the Buddha, perhaps help from an archetypal Buddha or Bodhisattva figure that we feel some connection with. We can see that, if we like, as a higher part of ourselves, or we can see it as an external power. Ultimately, the two are not different. We may still find this word prayer off-putting or non-Buddhist, but this prayer we're talking about is really a way of focusing our positive volition, focusing our positive will, and aligning and reinforcing this will with something stronger than our own willpower. So our founder, Sangharakshita, was once asked whether it's okay for Buddhists to pray to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And he replied that if we felt like praying, we should pray and sort out the theology later, or the Buddhology later. Another very respected order member, Subhuti, took this even further and said he thought that we should just pray and forget about the theology, forget about the Buddhology. So we could use that sense of prayer. I really want this, please help me to get this. A sort of prayer to something higher, or a prayer, if you like, to something higher in ourselves. And if you're familiar with the practice of mantra chanting, this can also be a good way of getting us in touch with something beyond our usual self. So we can do it out loud or silently in our head. And as we chant, we can focus on our desire to put our resolution into practice and even ask for help. Chanting a mantra can also be something that we do at various times during the day to reconnect us with our aspiration on the bus or waiting for the bus, wherever we have a spare moment. So connecting with an aspect of the enlightened mind can be a very effective way of helping us to make positive changes. It puts us in touch with that element in ourselves. But help can also come from other people. So you might like to team up with a friend to support each other in making the changes you want to make over the coming week. You might have an opportunity to arrange that during the groups or in the break. So when we do the urban retreat that I've mentioned earlier, we suggest that people team up with at least one other, we call them Dharma buddies, who will keep in contact with each other over the week, tell each other how they're doing, give each other some support. So that's the 5 forces: the force of motivation, the force of familiarization, the force of destroying demons, I got it in the right order, the force of the white seed, they're the wrong way around, motivation, familiarization, destroying white seed, destroying demons, and aspirational prayer, I think. As homework, I'm going to suggest that you might think of something positive. Maybe you've already think of something positive you'd like to put in place in your life this week, or something negative you'd like to change, and think about how you could use the 5 forces to do that. So when you're thinking about what you want to change, don't be too ambitious. Don't set yourself up for a fall, but make it something worthwhile. Also, make it specific. If you think I'm going to go beyond my anxiety this week, that won't work. If you think I'm going to go for a run every evening this week to burn off my anxiety, that's doable. And if you slip up at any time during the week, don't let that sort of completely derail you. For one day you don't get up to meditate, just do it the next day. Get back on the path. So I hope you'll be given a handout. If you're in the Great Hall, you'll be given a handout with the 5 forces on one side, and on the other, a sort of simple worksheet about how you might apply them on the other side. And in the groups, you could talk about what you're going to do and how you'll use those 5 forces. And you'll get a chance to share how you got on next week. So I don't know if the tech people can put up the 5 forces for the people online on the chat. Perhaps you can. Anyway, I just round off with what the text says about itself. It says, this teaching is the essence of the sutras and tantras, profound yet simple. It is difficult to hear deep teaching like this, as rare as finding buried treasure. So use the treasure over the coming week. Okay, that's very much.